Well, we've had so many great guests in the blue white breakdown over the past few weeks. But today I am very proud to have Dave Revsine from the Big Ten Network. We've known for a little while. Dave, how are you? And you just got done with Big Ten today, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, I'm doing great, David. How are you?
It's a beautiful day in Downingtown. No, it's not. It's kind of dreary and gloomy, but it's Philadelphia in the winter. Uh, I I was preparing for this thing and thinking about 2007 and where you guys were and the leap of faith. I don't know. I don't want to speak out of term, but it might have been a leap of faith that you would join this fledgling startup, albeit with some money behind it, but you didn't know what you were getting into, did you, in 2007 when the Big Ten Network first booted up?
I don't think anyone really truly knew what they were doing. I think who joined, but I definitely had a lot of. I think kind of in the lead up to it, where I had interviewed with them and started to understand a little bit of the vision. I think I went from thinking, well, I should probably go listen to what these people have to say. That was really kind of my mindset when I came out to do the interview.
And you're at ESPN at the time, or had you gone to
Yeah.
something else?
No, I was at ESPN. I was coming up on a new contract, and honestly, I've told this story a few times, so I don't think I'm in any way, saying anything that my bosses aren't aware of now. But I mean, I really went like this kind of a leverage play, right? Like I had a new
Oh, really?
contract coming up. Oh yeah, and you're just kind of all right. Well, let's see what the
Oh, I
market,
didn't. I didn't
let's
know
see what's
that.
out there on the market, and then I'll
That's
bring that
tremendous.
offer back, and maybe that'll get me a little bit more money at ESPN because while they may be a nice offer, you're always like, well, how can I play this a little bit differently? So I went to the initial meeting kind of with that as the mindset. But and then the first meeting went really well. It was with a guy named Leon Schweier, who was our executive producer when we started. Unfortunately, has passed away. It was really an amazing, amazing guy. And then he invited me to come back, I think like a week or so later, and meet with Jim Delaney and Mark Silverman. And when I met with those two, I mean, I had a great meeting with Leon, but then when I met with those two, I kind of knew like, hey, actually, this is really something I'd be interested in. I understood their vision for it a little bit more than I had initially and what it was going to be. I just don't think I really understood like, this is a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week, 365-day a year network. I don't think I got that because I think we were all kind of thinking of that ESPN Plus model, like where that was where the Big Ten was, right? On kind of those, they was syndicated and you could just pick it
Yeah,
up,
and,
right?
and
Right?
and
Like
had been and had
yeah,
been for decades. That
right, right.
kind of an auxiliary, but not
Yeah,
really the face of a
right,
league that had not
right.
been done.
So I didn't really get that, but Jim and Mark explained that to me. I don't think I really understood like that I was their guy. Like I thought I was one of several people they were pursuing or whatever. They're like, no, like you're really like the only person we're talking to, and we want you to be the front and center, the first person we hire. And so that, we all have a little bit of an ego, I suppose, right? That was really gratifying that of the 6 million Big Ten grads in the world they had chosen me. I thought that was pretty cool. And then it was just right up my alley. Like I don't think I quite
Yeah,
understood just how perfect it was. I'm a college sports fan through and through.
grew
I
up
was
in
certainly had
Urbana, Illinois,
I was born in Urbana.
the
We
black
moved,
sheep
yeah.
sister from Champaign.
we moved when I was 2, so I don't really have
Oh, okay. It
I
doesn't
don't
count.
have great memories of or any memory of living there. I grew up really in suburban Chicago, but yeah, like my dad taught in Illinois and then at Wisconsin and Northwestern. Both my parents went to Northwestern. My sister went to Wisconsin. Like we were a Big Ten family through and through. I
You're
grew
you're
up going to Big Ten
You're
games.
so much like I am. I mean, I went to Ohio State. I've covered Penn State. My father-in-law went to Michigan State. My nephew quarterbacked at Maryland. Well, that kind of doesn't, it's not like Big Ten heritage, but so what? My
Yeah,
brother-in-law has been a coach at Michigan for 3 decades. So I've got all this amalgam. I mean, Josh has just gotten his doctorate in Indiana. We're this Big Ten family, and I've got this decades and decades. I don't know anyone other than me who has this breadth and depth of knowledge of this conference that we both love, get frustrated
yeah.
with sometimes. but we know all this stuff about, and that comes through in everything you guys do. And I got to say, I don't know of a studio show, and I don't want to be blowing rainbows up your butt, but I mean, this is just the way I feel. A studio show that's relaxed and extemporaneous, and it feels like the guys aren't on scripts uh, as much as maybe NBA on TNT, and that's the only thing you can compare it to. With you and Rafael Davis, Mike DeCourcy, my old buddy, John Beeline, Bruce Weber, Trent Meacham, and Rick Pizzo. I don't think I've really forgotten any, but Rick Pizzo was kind of the B to your A as far as a host. But how do you must have thought about how you engender that sort of atmosphere on a set. I think Ernie Johnson is the only person who does that as well as you do. It's relaxed. It doesn't feel like all those ESPN. In fact, and I mean, you can name all these studio shows, the NFL shows, the NBA shows, they all just feel stiff. That is not true of these Big Ten shows, the BTN shows. I think Rob Michael probably deserves some credit. I don't know. You tell me. Anyway, how did you try to engender that atmosphere?
Yeah, Rob and all of our producers, I think, are a big part of that. I think the big thing, David, and I don't want this to come off the wrong way in any way, but I think that one thing that we really pride ourselves on is everyone knows what they're talking about.
Yeah,
And if
study.
you know what you're talking about, and admittedly, like if you don't know what you're talking about and you're only covering 14 teams, then there's something wrong with you, right? Like it's not that hard. Like no one is asking us to come in and execute brain surgery on a regular basis, right? It's sitting around, it's talking about sports. It's something that you and I do whenever we get on the phone together, or when we're fortunate enough to see each other in person. It's something I do with my buddies from college or other media members or whatever it might be. We're sitting around and talking about sports that we know about and teams that we know about. Jerry and Howard and I have spent the last 17 years every year going and watching teams practice in the preseason when it comes to football. Like if we don't know about those teams, then shame on us. And so I think if you really know what you're talking about, it does create a more relaxed atmosphere. I'm honored you would compare us to that NBA show. That's an unbelievable show. And I'm not really much of an NBA fan anymore. I was when the Bulls were really good.
You know
but,
what you know what I mean.
But it's
You know
what
what I
they
mean, though,
do.
right?
It's so
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
and that's like Ernie's amazing, and Charles is one of the greatest personalities ever to
He's
be
just
on
hilarious.
television. No, he's great. I mean, he's funny as hell, and he's just a great guy. But yeah, like I think that's kind of what we're all shooting for in this business, is to make it relaxed, to make it informative, to make it fun. And I appreciate you saying that. We certainly get some nice feedback. We get not nice feedback too. I mean, that's just kind of the
But
nature of the world we live in.
it's what makes
Yeah,
it
yeah,
enjoyable, and you can tell also that Raphael and Trent have booked up on everything, and
yeah. They just know their deal. Yeah, they know the deal.
but they're also fluid in their ideas. They're liquid in the way they get things out, and you can't say that about all ex jocks or ex coaches on the air. Bruce Weber's terrific too, and
He is great.
Jerry's an old friend. Jerry used to employ my brother-in-law in a former life at Vanderbilt. And I think that's how I got to know Jerry. I don't know. But when the host is inclusive and relaxed and funny, you can pull that off. Anyway, let's get to some stuff that people actually, this is the blue-white breakdown. So we got to,
We got to talk about the blue and the white.
we have you. We've got to talk about Penn State basketball. It's kind of a down point right now, but how would you assess what Mike Rhoades has done this season, where the program is overall, considering what Micah Shrewsbury did the prior two?
I actually think Mike Rhoades has done a great job. Like, I think he is in the conversation. He's not going to win Big Ten Coach of the Year, but he's in the conversation for the better coaching jobs. I mean, when you talk about having to essentially turn over an entire roster in 59 days, I get that in this day and age of college basketball, there are a lot of teams trying to turn over their roster and go out and find new players. So it's not unique anymore to do that. But I actually think like he hit some home runs here, right? I mean, Ace Baldwin's been great. I think Kern's gotten better and better. Like Qudus Wahab is Like, let's give him a ton of credit. I think he's had a really nice year. You can just kind of go down the list. I think he's done a nice job. I think he really believes in the program and wants to be there, which is important. He's from Pennsylvania, which I think is great. I don't think that's a prerequisite, but I think it's a place that he sees as a destination, and that he believes he can build into something. I just think he's done a really nice job. Like, is it frustrating to see the big lead evaporate like it did this weekend against Minnesota? No question. But I mean, look at where some of the historically great programs in this league are
Yeah,
that weren't in the same position that
yeah.
he was, that didn't have to turn over their whole roster this year. So I think when you put it in the context of what he had to do, I think they're in a pretty good spot. I like the style of play. I think it's going to make them unique. It's going to make them challenging to prepare for. I've had a couple of their games this year, and just in talking to the coaches who are preparing to play against them, it's a really challenging style. So when you get that moving forward, but when you will have had, 359 days rather than 59 days to put together your roster, when you can put a little bit more thought into everyone that you bring in, I don't know, David. I'd be excited if I were a Penn State basketball fan. I think it's a great hire. I think his track record is really good, and I'm anxious to see where this goes in a few years here.
I think the few and the proud is what they call the Penn State basketball fans, because they are, it's a lot like Indiana football. And if
Yeah.
you've been around here, you just can't know that how limited the fan base is, how limited the scope of the knowledge is. It's just a football. It's more of a hockey and wrestling area than it is a basketball area. You could argue that
Well,
basketball is fourth in central Pennsylvania behind all of those sports. And that has always been the core problem at Penn State. And I have covered this program for 34 years
right.
and half my life. And that has always been at the core of the trouble to anyone trying to get it going.
Well, let me say this, and again, I understand that there are a lot of financial pressures in this day and age on college athletics, but I don't understand why they don't play more in Rec Hall. I mean, that was a really good atmosphere
Wasn't it great?
against Illinois. I just think that I think they've given up home court advantage to a certain extent,
Oh
being in
my
the Bryce
God.
Jordan Center and not having total control over that building. And I get it. Like, you have this huge arena, and it doesn't make sense not to play some of your games there. But I think to strategically put games in Rec Hall, I just think, like, especially given the location of the school, given how it's hard for everyone who wants to get there on a weeknight to get there. I mean, there are a lot of forces at play, and I don't think Penn State's unique in that, David. Like, I've been in a lot of arenas in the Big Ten where it's not totally full on a weeknight. I would use
No,
Iowa
people,
as an
people
example.
that gets
Yeah,
to the problem. I mean,
yeah,
people from here probably don't know where Champaign-Urbana is. It's out in the middle of the weeds.
yeah. It's far.
Iowa City, for most of the people who come to those games, is not easy to get to. There are places all over the Big Ten where, when winter hits, I mean, the flatlands, if you got a gale force wind, this is the difference, though. Those people love basketball and they will go to the games. And Penn State basketball fans, it's something to do on a night when there's nothing. What do we do? I don't get a basketball game. The people are not going to drive through the mountains 90 miles from Harrisburg, which is the largest metropolis around there,
Right.
100 miles. Just like Bob Knight said, I've been to Penn State. It's a goddamn camping trip. There's nothing around for 100 miles. That's what he said when they were invited to the Big Ten. And he wasn't wrong. He wasn't wrong. Anyway, it's a good place to segue into my next point. There are moves being made here by arguably the four weak sisters of Big Ten hoops in the last couple of decades. Your alma mater, Northwestern, Nebraska, of all teams, and it's probably going to be Hoiberg's probably going to be the Big Ten Coach of the Year as it stands now. Ben Johnson and Minnesota and Penn State. They're all at least in the middle of the pack. Northwestern's better. Nebraska's better. Are we entering a period and there's kind of a shifting paradigm in everything of college athletics, where there's a window of opportunity here for new blood at the top in Big Ten basketball. I don't know how long Izzo is going to go on. That program looks kind of tired. I'm saying it. You don't have to. Um, and Purdue is mainly the big name. Illinois is still powered by great talent, but other than those two, I think there's an opportunity. Is this a theory that's cockamamie or not?
No, I would agree with you. I think each one of those situations is its own entity, as every school is, obviously. And if we wanted to go kind of case by case as to why they succeeded, we could. But it's your podcast, not mine. So I'll let you make the call on that. But
what a ringing endorsement.
but I just think, like, look, there are schools that have built-in advantages.
They do,
and that is the case in every college sports league. There are schools that have history. There are schools that have resources, and there are schools that don't have as much. But I think that basketball, because of the nature of the sport, because we're only speaking of a small number of players, I think coaching impacts it dramatically. Even what we were talking about with Mike Rhoades, right? Like coaching style. What style of play do you choose, and how can a coach massage his roster to get the players that can succeed within that coaching style? I think that's a big part of it. Like, I do think that if you're not winning at some of these schools that are historic powers, you're doing something wrong, right? Whereas kind of, like Indiana,
Indiana.
No, Indiana should be better than they are. Like, there's no reason for them to be where they are right now. There's no reason for Indiana not to be able to make a 3-point.
Why don't we just go into this? Why don't we just go into this?
Okay. Yeah.
Indiana, I asked Raphael, I talked to Raphael last week, and I asked,
you got the knowledgeable person on a week ago, and then you brought on. Yeah.
I see the way this goes. You're nobody more knowledgeable than you, but he does have relatives who are Indiana grads, like close relatives.
Yes.
He's
siblings.
a Purdue guy, and he has a pretty good outlook on what's going on there. But to me, it's almost like Indiana, like the smothering. It's the opposite of Penn State. I have also said Penn State and Indiana are like reverse doppelgangers of each other, basketball and football wise. And wow. I can't even imagine what it's like for an Indiana coach to start there and go to work there.
Because of the pressure, you're saying.
Yeah, the smothering. They care so much. They care way too much almost.
Well, I mean, I think you want to be somewhere where people care deeply, right? Because I do think, especially in this day and age where the boosters can care with their pocketbook and it can make a difference, right? I mean, I do think like those resources are really important. And so maybe those jobs, which come with an undue amount of pressure, no doubt, but also come with the resources other places don't have. You know, I do think like watching Indiana this weekend, like Xavier Johnson made a difference. I'm not saying Xavier Johnson puts them in the top half of the Big Ten. Like not having him healthy really for the better part of the last 2 years, I do think that's been an issue. But the fact that Indiana can't make a three in a time where the three-pointer is so ubiquitous.
And in a state with barn hoops where
right.
I mean, home of Hoosiers.
I agree.
The driveway shooter who makes the three from everywhere. Yes. Come on.
Yes.
Come on.
No, that part of it is a little crazy. It's just crazy they don't have a better backcourt. Their front court's great. And like Khalil Ware is going to be a big time player. He'll play in the NBA for a long time. I think Mackenzie Mbaka will too. So I think that's part of the challenge, right? Like you're at Indiana and you got two NBA players, you're not going to make the NCAA tournament. You know, Michigan had 2 first-round picks last year and Hunter Dickinson and didn't make the NCAA tournament. So it's not that there's a lack of talent. It's just fitting the pieces together is hard. And I do think, like, again, I'm not making excuses for anyone, David, but like roster management is different than it used to be because you can't count on when you recruit a kid that they're going to be there for longer than a year. And so sometimes rosters get out of whack and you don't have the player at this position that you were counting on having. I do think that's part of it. But again, it's weird. I mean, we're I think it was a week ago now, or maybe 2 weeks ago, Ohio State obviously has had a nice little surge here. But we were looking at a bottom 4 in the Big Ten where all 4 of them had played in the national championship game this century, right? I mean, it was Michigan, it was in Indiana, Maryland, and Ohio State, like in the bottom four, like that.
And,
That was crazy to me.
Michigan State in the middle of the pack, looking aimless in turns like they're going to make a run and then they're not going to make a run, and they're a middle of the pack team and not a very fun team to watch. And these are the name brands in the league. That's why I just think there's room here if you can get NIL support, and who knows what NIL support's going to mean in the future, because if players are employees, doesn't that mean that the schools can give them NIL as they see fit and forget these collectives? I think that's where we're heading. So if football money comes into the equation, maybe Nebraska and Penn State can really make a run. And I can't let you go also without, you're a Northwestern grad. You try to conceal it the best you can, I think, on the show in the interest of fairness and objectivity. But we had some talks about Chris Collins' future on the phone a couple of years ago, and neither one of us was optimistic. Jim Phillips left for the ACC. It looked like he was naked and in real danger. And then he did two things. He hired a couple of assistants, I think, in that offseason in 2022. He hired Talor Battle and Chris Lowry. And I can't think of two assistants that were better hires in the last few years in Big Ten basketball. And Bobby did something that neither one of us thought he could do. He made Boo Buie, his half brother, into a completely different player. And I don't think his impact can be minimized in that respect. And look what's happened in Northwestern with Chris Lowry. Chris Lowry was a kind of an out of the limelight coach at Southern Illinois for a long time, struggled there, but a defensive guru. And he made that place into, especially last year when they had Audige and Bowie in the backcourt. They were a tough team to play against. That was never true of Northwestern before. So these hires really revitalized that program. He's got players, sure, but they're doing this without Ty Berry. And I know they lost the last game, but my God, who saw this coming?
Yeah, it's really an amazing transformation. And I think you've nailed it, as you often do, in terms of why it happened. Bringing in Talor Battle, I think really worked wonders. Because Talor Battle is what Boo Buie could become, right? With the right guidance of understanding what's a good shot, what's not a good shot. I think it was also challenging because Pete Nance was and is an incredibly talented player. And I think Chris looked at Pete Nance and thought this should be the focal point of his team. And Pete Nance is a wonderfully nice kid. And again, has a ton of talent. I mean, he's playing in the NBA, or has played a little bit in the NBA this year. But I just don't think Pete was really cut out to kind of like be the alpha. I think he was a really good complementary player. And so in a weird sort of way, when he left, and to a lesser extent, when Ryan Young left in that offseason, Ryan Young went to Duke. I mean, so you lose a player to Duke in North Carolina off a team that didn't even make the NIT, right? And you lose contributors to Duke in North Carolina. And you get better, right? You go from being a bottom middle of the pack team to making the NCAA tournament, finishing second in the league. And that was because I think Chris recognized that like these guards were different. And if you could rein in Boo and help him understand what was a good shot and what wasn't a good shot, but harness his talent, and then use Audige, who was a great athlete and a fabulous defender, and then bring in Chris Lowry, who is a defensive mastermind, and get these guys to buy into that you had a chance. And that was what they did last year. And it really was a great story. But what I think really speaks to Chris's coaching acumen is that this year they've had to change their team.
Totally
like they started well, and they've had to change in the middle of the year because they started off as a great offensive team, right? They beat Purdue. They're scoring in the 90s. They played Purdue again in West Lafayette and took them to overtime. And again, like we're keeping up with them. Beat Illinois in a high-scoring game at home, and then Ty Berry went down. And this was a team that was leading the nation in three-point percentage in conference play. And and without Ty to spread the floor, they had to become a really real defensive team again. Like if you look at their numbers and you watch them play from before Ty Berry got hurt and after Ty Berry got hurt, it's a totally different team. And now Matthew Nicholson got hurt in that Iowa game. They're starting center, so it'll be interesting to see whether he comes back and what that's going to look like. But that will necessitate another change. So I think he's done. This is maybe a better coaching job, honestly, than he did last year if he's able to push them across the finish and into the tournament.
I just cannot. I don't think there's a player I've been more surprised of his turnaround and how good he is now as Boo Buie. I just think he is a tremendous national level point guard that people still just don't appreciate. And you can't give Talor enough credit for that. I mean, no one thought Bubby he didn't really have a lot of coaching experience. He left the Penn State staff, and yet you look at him over there. You've seen him more than I have. You see him giving little nuggets of advice to his brother, and it looks like he belongs on that staff completely.
Yeah, and I just want to say, David, it's not just his brother, right? I mean, I know you're not suggesting that, but I like Talor Battle. Like, I go, obviously every time I call a game, I go to the shoot around, and Talor Battle has the scouts, and I mean, he's a really good assistant coach, right? It's not just coaching his brother. I mean, it's coaching the whole team. It's being in charge of the walkthrough. It's all of those things that people don't get if you don't watch practices the way that you and I do, right? The way it works in college basketball, for those who don't know, is assistant coaches work ahead. And so you would know, like 3 games in advance, okay, we're playing Northwestern this week. You're in charge of the scout of them. And then whoever that coach is will take over that practice and walk through that team's plays with the scout team and give them all the lay of the land. Talor does that in the same way that Brian McIntosh does it for some games, same way that Chris Lowry does it for some games. So, yeah, he's a really good coach and certainly deserves a lot of the credit for what Northwestern has done. And how about to have 2 brothers or 14 teams in this league at last count, David, for now? And how about to have
we're getting to that.
Yeah. 2 brothers who are the leading scorers for 2 different programs? It's pretty cool.
If you know the history of that family, and
I do,
my goodness, Talor is. I don't want to say this in a way that it does. Let's just say it, a kind of a dysfunctional family, and Talor was Denise Murphy, his mother, is a wonderful woman. But Talor lived out of a car for a little while.
Yeah, I know. He told me that.
Albany. They have a lot of history in Harrisburg. He kind of is. I think we all know families where one person stops a trend of dysfunction, and Taylor's like this level-headed kid who has done this with none of the advantages of so many other people that I know. And nothing has bothered him. He's like impervious to all this chaos that's going on around him. And he is this level-headed, and he's not a kid anymore. God, my God, he must be like 34.
Mid-30s, I think. Yeah.
But I can't give him enough credit for this.
No, and I'm with you 100%. Talor has told me some of those stories, and I think he did a really good job of trying his best to shield some of his younger siblings, including Boo, from some of that. And no, huge credit to them. And I give Boo a ton of credit too, because it's easy to leave in this day and age. Especially like when you see guys leaving your program, when you see Ryan Young and Pete Nance saying, "Yeah, we're getting out of here. We want to play in the NCAA tournament." And for Boo to say, "No, I'm staying. Like I believe in the guys who are here. I believe in the coaching staff." It's a cool story. It's really been a great one. And I hope, again, like we talk about, how do you build a program? Part of the way you build a program in this day and age is getting players to buy in and getting them to understand that, hey, the grass isn't always greener. Sometimes it is. And I'm not saying that in any way to criticize people who leave, and I think really highly of Pete and Ryan. I spent a lot of time around them, but when you stay and when you do it at a place, and then like they just put Billy McKinney in the rafters, the first player ever there to have his number retired. Now that they've started that trend, Boo Boo will be up there pretty soon.
Yeah, he will. Yeah, he will. And the final thing, I can't leave without mentioning Caitlin Clark and this phenomenon.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna tell you straight out. And by the way, if you can hear my TV in the kitchen that just popped on because it was on delay on the DVR, I was getting ready to watch Caitlin Clark's game. Uh, um, I think she's the most popular college athlete in America. And
Yes.
could you have ever foreseen such a thing 20 or even 10 years ago? It's mind-boggling.
How much time do we have? I mean, I love this story, David. I am. Let me just say, so I'm a father of three girls. I have one daughter who's a senior in college, and we have identical twins who are freshmen in college, and they were born in Connecticut. And one of the things that I said to my wife when they were born is, I think one of the things that's really cool about living in Connecticut is that the biggest sports celebrities in the state are women. That it's the women's basketball team at UConn. And this was even like we were there when UConn men were winning national championships.
How far did you didn't go far like Sue Bird far back, but you went to Diana Taurasi in those years, right?
Yeah, no, we were let's see, when did Sue Bird? Yeah, Sue Bird was there. I got there in 96. So yeah, Sue Bird was there. Yeah, I mean it was amazing. Like it was an incredible phenomenon. And I just love that. Like as a father of girls, and I'm not saying it's exclusive to people who have girls, but I think you look at the world through a little bit different lens. And so I just think like this story has been so cool because I'm blown away by the way, and we just had her on our show today, and I'd spoken to her in probably a year in that way, like in a long form sit down sort of way. We had her on because she was named Big Ten Player of the Year. And I said to her, like, I just marvel at how she has handled all of
That's
this.
what I thought you were going to say.
Yeah, because like, yeah, like
nothing bothers her. Yeah.
No, nothing phases her at all. And you think about like when these kids are going to the games with their mom or their dad or whoever it is, someone special in their life who's taking them to the game, it's the biggest deal ever for them, right? But for Caitlin, it's just another game. And you have to be on each and every day. I think it was it Mickey Mantle, I think, who said, like, someone asked, why do you play so hard? And he said, well, because it might be the first time that someone's seen me play. Yeah. Yeah. Right? I think it was Mickey Mantle. Yeah. Like, I think that, like, that to me is greatness personified, right? It's that each and every day you bring everything you've got. And part of it is for the people who are watching, but part of it is some fire that's inside of you. And man, she's got that fire. She's got unbelievable talent. She is impervious to what's going on around her. She, in fact, seems to feed off of it. I don't know. I think she's incredible. Like, she's an amazing talent, but she's so much more than that. And I love, love, love what it has done for college athletics, not just for women's athletics, but just for college athletics. Like, and it is a woman is so cool. But I don't know. I just love it, David. I think it's cool.
I can admit this now, but I mean, when Rob was a producer of Comcast Sportsnet, and I used to go on Daily News Live on there, we're talking 15 years ago, we used to joke about women's basketball. We used to call it unwatchable. On the air, we said this because the level of it just wasn't what it is now. And what people who don't really watch it don't understand is it isn't just Caitlin Clark now.
No, I know.
The game is so much better than it was even 10 years ago. It's as if the fact that those forerunners that we were talking about, the Connecticut women, you can get back to the Tennessee women, but also video streaming, where high school games are on YouTube, where girls are getting exposed all the time. Their games are getting exposed. They've all upped their games so much, where it's now so much better a game than it used to be. And Caitlin Clark's only the pinnacle. She's kind of the Steph Curry of all of them.
Right.
But the game is just so much better just in the last 10 years. That's got to be heartening for any any father of daughters, any parent of daughters.
Yeah, I think so. And one of the things that's cool is like my family. Now, my daughters are actually big sports fans. My oldest in particular loves sports, but the other two are big sports fans too. So they will watch sports with me. So we're empty nesters first year. So my wife not as big a sports fan. I always join. I always joke. Yeah, ironically, I always joke like those movies where there's the people who claim to be an accountant, but they're actually a CIA operative. Like I could claim to be a sportscaster, but actually be a CIA operative, and I'm not sure my wife would know the difference because she hadn't turned on the Big Ten Network a whole lot, right? Like I would, my cover wouldn't be blown. Yeah. My cover wouldn't be blown at all. But she loves watching Caitlin Clark. And what's cool about
that's the ultimate.
Yeah. So we were watching on Sunday, and we're watching Ohio State against Iowa. And obviously Ohio State ended up winning the game. But like we're watching JC Sheldon. She's like, man, that girl's good. Yeah. Wow, Cody McMahon is good. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And like you're going down the list and saying, like, it's to your point, it's not just Caitlin Clark, but Caitlin Clark can be the gateway to show people how great this sport is and how skilled these players are. So I do think it's cool, and it's been neat to have kind of a not really a front row seat. I mean, I haven't actually seen her play in person, but it's been
I should have gone at Rutgers. I mean, I'm closer to Rutgers than I am to Penn State. She didn't come to Penn State this year, but I didn't plan for Rutgers, and I should have gone out there. It's an easy drive for me.
But it's been cool
I wish I had.
Right. I think, yeah. But it's been cool to like be a part of the network that covers the games, right? Yeah, and to see the joy that she's brought, to see the ratings. Like I love the eyeballs on it. And it's amazing. Like my girls are passionate fans. The younger ones are passionate fans of the U.S. women's national team. And so I think back to, I hosted the World Cup. One of my interesting assignments at ESPN was in 1998. It was the first.
What Brandy Chastain and all that. Yeah.
No, the Brandy Chastain. Right. The Brandy Chastain World Cup. I hosted the men's World Cup in 98, but Julie Foudy, so 99 was that World Cup. But Julie Foudy in 98 was my co-host in studio. And so I kind of became friendly with Julie. And then in 99, that next summer was, the Mia Hamm, Julie Foudy, and then of course Brandy Chastain with the famous moment at the Rose Bowl. My girls are passionate fans of the U.S. women's national team. Like they know the ins and outs of every player. Like,
and that's been going on in soccer for a while now.
And it's super cool.
I think I know where you're going. That was 25 years ago. This could happen in women's basketball now because
yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Dave, this has been a blast. Thanks so much for doing this. And we didn't even get to the Big Ten tournament, which is the next thing on the agenda, but our time is up. You guys do great work, and say hi to all my buddies on there, especially my agent, Mike DeCourcy, who is my partner in crime on Penn State football many, many, many moons ago.
He is a good man. All right, David, always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend.
And that's the Blue White Breakdown.